What's up, you guys? It's Monty, and today I'm here to talk about Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare. This is the first book in the Dark Artifices series, which is the most recent addition to the Shadowhunter universe. I read this past week. Shout out to the DMV, without whom this video would not be going up today, because since I was stuck there, I needed something to do, and so I read. And I have to say that I don't know if this is going to be a discussion about Lady Midnight so much as that it's going to be just a discussion on a pattern of writing that I do not care about from Cassandra Clare. And I also think that I went into this book with too high of expectations. I don't want to say that it's really hard for me to think of positives about this book, but it kind of is. I guess I should give a synopsis. That's usually what people do. So Lady Midnight is set 5 years after the conclusion of the Mortal Instruments. So now Emma Carstairs is 17 years old. She is still investigating the death of her parents from 5 years ago. And that investigation leads our cast, which is mainly Emma, the Blackthorn children, sans Helen. More on that later. Christina Rosales, a local warlock named Malcolm. I think he's actually the High Warlock of Los Angeles. We go from there. In terms of the plot of this book, I don't really think Cassandra Clare was equipped to write a murder mystery. And that's central to the plot of this first book. And then at the end, like the last third, it kind of sets up where the trilogy, I'm assuming, is going. But again, I feel like it was almost wasted opportunity because you're no longer constrained by what happened, like what you're building towards, right? It's like if you're writing a prequel series, you still have to make things happen in a way where the events of the current series can happen because everything takes place in the same timeline. Whereas The Dark Artifices is the first time Cassandra Clare... I mean, I guess some of the novellas, I haven't read any of them. I have no interest in reading the fan fiction. But the Dark Artifices, as it's set in the future in the same timeline, you could have another villain like a Sebastian or a Valentine, and while I didn't really appreciate Sebastian's motives, which seemed to be his just incestuous desires, they were world-ending villains, you know what I mean? Like, there was actual stakes involved. Whereas here, if there are actual stakes with what happens in the third act of the book, they're not readily apparent, and they don't seem as catastrophic to the greater world as the Mortal Instruments did. And so you really just have this girl who I didn't care about. I don't really care about Emma. Julian is the single most insufferable character in all of Shadowhunters. He is not only my least favorite fucking love interest. I mean, I guess he gets points for being a love interest that is not a Herondale, but oh my god. Julian Blackthorn is the no rights. No rights. Every 3 seconds I was done with him. I thought that Jamie Watson from the Study in Home series was the worst love interest I've ever read this year. No. Julian fucking Blackthorn takes the cake. I don't understand how anybody on this earth likes him. I do understand a lot of his motivation comes from being parentified at a young age. He's been looking after his young siblings since the age of 12. He has to deal with a guardian, Arthur Blackthorn. Was it Arthur? It was some A name. His uncle is not fit to look after the Blackthorn children, and I understand that he's been running the institute. He's had a lot of pressure put on him from a young age, and so there were instances in the novel where I could understand why Julian was doing the things that he was doing or saying the things that he was saying, but it just gave me fucking Will Herondale vibes, and I wasn't here for Will Herondale, and Julian cranked it to like a 12, and I was just like, sir, you have like some valid points for all of the trauma that you've suffered through. It didn't work. It didn't work for me because I didn't care. What was central to my dislike of Lady Midnight is really the dynamic of Emma Carstairs and Julian Blackthorn. So Tessa and Will, Clary and Jace, and now Julian and Emma at least in the Mortal Instruments, all of the other side relationships we got to explore. So you got to see Simon and Maya, Simon and Izzy, Alec and Magnus got to be in the background for 3 seconds, and then when they kind of came to the foreground, it was Alec being a fucked up character who I can never forgive. All the other love interest situations you got to see play out on screen, but you have them as the central focus, the central narrative drive, and really the only romantic relationship in the book. Christina, who's also at the Institute, she was from Mexico. I did like the little Easter egg that Christina was from the town that Cassandra Clare wrote City of Lost Souls in. I think it was Lost Souls. It might have been Fallen Angels. Christina's romantic interest doesn't really appear until like the last part of the book, but it's not important to the book or critical to the book or at all doing anything. Julian and Emma's relationship was not something I was invested in. Their relationship at the core of the book never worked for me, and all of the other ones that were sort of tangentially mentioned or brushed up against felt far more compelling. I think that choosing to focus on these 2 white heterosexual characters, when you have all of these other minorities or marginalized identities like playing background and we're not going to delve into them, it felt really gross to me, particularly in the fact that Helen Blackthorn is still fucking banished to Wrangel Island. Like, she's just chilling out there. And I think that Mark made an excellent point at the end. I think it was Mark who made this point at the end of the book, who was like, well, he made it first when he arrived. He was like, I thought you guys knew that, you know, the Wild Hunt was never going to give me away. Like, they weren't going to do that. You couldn't make a deal for me. I accepted my fate. I did what I did. But y'all just fucking abandoned Helen. And then we're like, well, we write letters and we make phone calls. And he was like, so? Like, am I supposed to be impressed by that? And I was like, thank you, because I'm not impressed by that either. To be fair, I think that for this book, where all of the Blackthorns were out here for the entirety of the novel, circumventing the will of the Clave, going against everything the Clave said, and they don't ever try to... We know that Helen can take visitors. Aileen got to marry Helen. Helen gets to go visit Aileen on occasion and made it sound like that was the thing that happened, or at least Helen and Aileen could visit while at Wrangel Island. But none of the Blackthorn siblings are going to Wrangel Island. None of them are just gonna uproot their lives and go, well, what are they gonna do? Kick them out of Wrangel Island? Like, no, you can't be here. Like, I don't think any of them really made an effort to go to Helen, and I don't think that banishing the lesbian characters to some island in the fucking Arctic was a good point. And this is what really drove me wild about this series. I think this series exemplifies that there are no healthy queer relationships in Cassandra Clare's works. First, it started off with Alec and Magnus in the first 3 books of the Mortal Instruments playing the background characters. The relationship was formed, developed, and like ended all in the background. Maybe not ended, but the development of the relationship between Alec and Magnus formed in the background of like City of Ashes. Then in City of Glass, they were kind of like public about what they were doing, but at that time, that was an alleged end of the series. So as far as we knew, we're not getting anything more of that. Then in City of Fallen Angels, when everyone comes back, Alec and Magnus are returning from like some year abroad thing, which was chronicled in the first Red Girls of Magic book. But as soon as they come back and they're on the page again in City of Fallen Angels, Alec becomes, again, immediately upset that his boyfriend is bisexual, who's had a history before him, who's going to live forever, and, like, angry, ugly, jealous Alec rears his ugly head and immediately hatches this plan to find a way to make his boyfriend mortal so they can spend a normal lifespan together. And when Magnus is appropriately upset that his boyfriend would try to do something like this and betrays his trust, they break up. So for the most of the book, they're in the background. And then Alec fucks over Magnus. And then in City of Heavenly Fire, it's like the Guilt Brigade is going to Magnus like, you know, Alec is really sad without you. And it's this scene where the Asian character, Magnus Bane, has to go, well, you know, I do kind of feel bad and I'm just going to go make up with him. And then they're together. And that's it. Like, that's the end of the book. There is no real, I don't think, time where Magnus Bane and Alec Light would ever get to work through whatever that fucked up dynamic was that made that whole situation happen. And so it's really hard for me to sit and be like, oh, I like you, Alec. And then Helen and Aileen Helen Blackthorn and Aileen Penhallow have the same dynamic where they're introduced and their relationship is formed and curated and developed in the background. The only problem is here is that it's staying in the background. And not only was it staying in the background, Cassandra Clare exiled the lesbian character to some island in the Arctic. And then our protagonists, while obviously working to circumvent the clave, and they have Mark here, they do nothing to try to get their sister back but write some letters and like make a phone call. Like, stop. No, I'm sorry. Skyping Helen in the Arctic is not enough for me. And then not only is Helen banished, but Aileen, who has no reason not to be in on this, to help them out, who is obviously a senior shadowhunter, who has abilities and skills that they could use, not allowed to be in the narrative either. Then you have Mark Anthony Blackthorn, who doesn't label his sexuality, but agrees that bisexual kind of fits. But then when Kieran betrays Mark, for what? Like, honestly, for what? So, like, I don't think Cassandra Clare is as inclusive as she is. I still don't think she has managed, and I know that this heterosexual relationships in her books face problems and troubles, but I think what really bothers me, you have all of these complicated, kind of borderline gross dynamics happening in the periphery of your story, which could, especially here with Mark and Helen here in this narrative, could be the central focus. They could be the center romantic anchor, but instead you have this story of forbidden love between two white heterosexual people. I'm sorry, you want me to sympathize with the two white heterosexual characters for their forbidden love when you have Mark Anthony and Helen Blackthorn literally being persecuted? Those two relationships in particular, to have them sidelined in order to focus on a forbidden love romance between two white heterosexual characters in 2016, this book came out in 2016, for what, Cassandra? I feel like I've said everything I have to say about that aspect of the book. So if I push all of that aside and I go back to the murder mystery, I just feel that it developed really slowly. It was definitely the slowest paced Shadowhunter novel that I've read yet. It's also the least focused on shadow hunting, I think. It really did try to be a murder mystery. I think that's commendable, to kind of step outside and, do your thing. As for the execution, again, I think it leaves a lot to be desired. I didn't really particularly care for it. It wasn't terrible by any means. I think that it worked out in the end. Solving Emma's parents' murder, I didn't really care for, but again, solving that, I think it made sense for how it was explained. I think everything else, sure, it made sense. I think my real crux of the problem with the plot was at the end. I didn't really care about what this person was trying to do. And I didn't particularly care about the revelation we get about the parabatai blonde, because it's still focusing on these two white heterosexual people and why they shouldn't be able to be together. So it's a weird space to exist in, and then you focus on these two people and their parabatai bond and how it's actually this other thing. And I didn't care for that revelation, because I felt that revelation was, again, just a really small problem to overcome. Because I don't care about their relationship. So if they were both to be driven mad, I didn't care. I also think that this book focuses a lot on Nephilim mundane relations in terms of how the Nephilim view the mundanes in a way that we kind of already got. I think this book does a lot of retreading of things that we already got in, like, A City of Bones or A Clockwork Angel. I think that, more so City of Bones. Because of that, I think that a lot of what was going on, it doesn't make sense to me. I really just don't understand this inherent, like, anti-mundane sentiment that the Shadowhunters have when their sole mandate seems to be to protect them. So, like, this whole thing about they don't use computers, They don't like all of this modern technology. When we saw modern technology being used in the shot, like in the Mortal Instruments, like we saw, there was a whole scene. It was a really, I won't say it was an important scene, but it was like the crux of a moment between, I think it was Jason and Alec, when Alec got his cell phone broken. And sure, a cell phone from like 2009 is going to be different than like a smartphone or a computer that they're using here in 2016. In terms of like technological advancement, I think I would love to know when they stopped really fucking with the Shadowhunter, like with the Mundanes, like when they really just like went to Idris and were like, we're just not gonna do this anymore. I just don't, I don't understand that dynamic, because it doesn't really make sense to me. Like, they have to travel amongst the mundanes in their daily life, and sure, they have glamour runes and they can kind of get around things, but if you're still operating vehicle, like some of these people are operating vehicles, like you have to, it doesn't make, like, I don't think that the world really makes sense. And I think that it's odd to have an urban fantasy where your protagonists or your heroes, like, their whole culture is against the urban setting that you've given them. It just, I don't know. It didn't. There was something about it in this book that I thought was really strange. That just general neurodivergence was handled within the Shadowhunter community. I mean, it made sense in their thinking about how, like, if you've, you know, had the angels, if your blood is from the angels, and God makes perfect creations, then like, I felt that was just like a really gross narrative to introduce. That like somehow being neurodivergent was somehow an imperfection, and that we shouldn't address it. We should just like sweep it under the rug. Like, it was just very dated. It was very dated for a community that always, it was like when I was reading The Infernal Devices, the messaging around their female shadow hunters felt very at odds with everything that we had learned up to that point about the Shadowhunter Society in the original Mortal Instruments. And so it just, again, like this whole, like, we're just gonna sweep neurodivergence under the rug, and not really address it, was weird. I also thought it was weird, it just didn't work for, it just, there's something about it that it was really uncomfortable for me to read in Lady Midnight, and I didn't fully appreciate it, and I didn't like how it was handled. Outside of that, I mean, I had a decent time. I didn't hate this book. I enjoyed it enough, but I thought that the scope that it presented was smaller than I had anticipated, and I would have appreciated something with a larger scope, something that felt tangibly like these people were actually in danger, kind of a thing. And I just never got the sense that they were. I never really felt that anything larger than the narrative happening was. I didn't feel like this book set up another book until the last, like, 2 chapters. And even then, it didn't feel like it was inherently important to what was happening. Like, it didn't, why I should care about those other things that could happen as a result of this, I didn't get. And, you know, when, like, you're reading the Mortal Instruments and you realize that, you know, Valentine wants to kill everybody, or Sebastian wants to kill everybody, or the Magister wants to kill everybody, fine. But when the plot of this one is like, this character wants to bring this character into existence again, I don't know. It's definitely not my favorite, and I don't think I'm going to love the Dark Artifices as much as I wanted. I'm just going to hope that I continue to get the quality Mark content that I want to get, because he is still my fairy king. I'm going to hope that Aileen and Helen get to do something, anything. I want to see that situation addressed. But outside of that, I don't really have anything else to say. So thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw here, make sure to subscribe. And I'll see you guys again in my next video, whenever that happens to be. But until then, bye.